Okay, here's a situation where I wanted to demonstrate that dreaded situation of parity, which is hard enough to deal with on a normal 4x4, even more hair-raising to deal with on a supercube, but pretty difficult and scary to deal with something like this, where you basically compact a cube down into a triangle, having to combine things together. But I can tell that parity is existing here because I obviously went through a different solve with this. But when I take a look at the last layer here, as I'm analyzing this, I see that the final side is, of course, the red and the white. I see both of the red corners are facing each other, which is appropriate, but these two are facing opposite. And that's not something that you're supposed to ever have happen. Because either you're going to get both of them facing the same way, or both of them facing opposite ways. But this is one of those situations where I can already tell that there's going to be parity. So if I have to maybe define which one's right, which one's wrong, it's kind of hard to do that. We can say, well, maybe this is right, maybe this is right, or we can say if this is right, then this is. So maybe who knows which one of these are wrong. So I'm just going to rotate this around and see where things go. So I'm going to start doing the algorithm here to rotate this around. So we have R, U, RI, U, R, 2U, RI. So let's see what we've got. This one looks to be in place. This one looks to be in place. If this is right, then this must also be right, which means this must be wrong and this must be right. The reason that I say that is because if this is right over here, this is flush in here, then this is facing opposite, this must be right. Even though this is facing flush, you can't have two. It's already apparent that this is right, and this is right, therefore this is wrong. So which one is the odd one out? Well, let's say that this is right, therefore this one must be wrong. So this will be my L formation here. I'm just going to say that these two are right. Yeah, so these two have to be right. This one has to be wrong. This is actually the right one, this is the wrong one. So that's going to be F, R, U, RI, UI, FI. Okay, that means these two must be right, because this is the line, this is good, this is good. Now notice this is now facing the opposite, these are facing opposite, and this is the same way. So something interesting may be emerging from this. But we do it again. Oops. F, R, U, RI, UI, and FI. Okay, so this is in, and these two appear to be out. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that you're not supposed to have two in and two out. So I'm going to say this is right. These two are actually correct. This one is wrong. Because all of these are supposed to be wrong. Now let's see what happens. So let's do our algorithm to rotate these guys around. Yeah, because if I'm going to say this is right, this one must be right. Which means that this one must be wrong because it's not supposed to be flush in there. So R, U, RI, U, R, 2U, RI, and once more until we have something that looks familiar. Okay, so this actually takes the form of the parity that we know. This is in, this is in, this is in, and this is not. And that was you kind of have to reason your way to get to here to know that this is wrong. So at some point, things were turned upside down. At some point, this was not put in appropriately, which means I've got to switch these two. And the only way that I'm going to switch these two is to apply the only way I'm going to switch these two is to apply that algorithm that we've seen with this before, what we call what I call the Red Bull algorithm. Now, as you recall, when you applied it to just the simple 4x4, and this was rotated, these were in and this was rotated down, it rotated this back up, and then just kind of flip-flopped these guys, which are fairly easily dealt with. In this case, not only did it flip it back up, it also rotated this, and I had to do a sort of small re-scramble to get it back. Now this is somewhere in between these two. Now bear in mind, it's not exactly a supercube. It has some of the characteristics because of the variable centers, but it of course has different characteristics, like 3 of these that look the same, 3 edges that look the same. And it's not exactly like this, even though all this is just this put from a cubic form to a triangular form, where it sort of mushed it together. So it's going to behave something like those two, but let's apply the algorithm and see what happens. If it behaves like a supercube, this will be flipped up, but this will be rotated, and I'll just have to sort of find my way back. Now I also want to point out that there's another characteristic with this, and you may ask, well, how could I have put these in wrong when the shape itself should guide me? In other words, these two are completely equivalent to each other. I wouldn't be able to tell the difference in terms of when I'm putting this in, but these aren't exactly equivalent to each other. They actually have different shapes. So how could I put them in wrong and end up with parity? And I want to point out that the answer to that may lie within the fact that the thing that makes this different from both of these guys, and its own unique puzzle, standing on its own 5 sides, is the fact that it has 3 edges that are completely equivalent to each other. These two components aren't equivalent to each other, but these as units are. So somehow that might have got skewed, is my suspicion, and that may enter into problems that might happen later. So the algorithm, as you recall, now we have to be very careful about our perspective. This is F, this is R, this is L, this is up, this is B back here, down back there. So it's going to be R, actually 2R, 1, 2, 2B, which is over here, 1, 2, 2U, 1, 2, and L, which comes like this. See? Red Bull. And then we go 2 up, 1, 2, RI, 2 up, 1, 2, R, 2 up, once more, 1, 2, then we have 2F, 1, 2, R, 2F, and it looks like a heart, that's cute, 2F, 1, 2, then LI, LI, 2B, 1, 2, and 2R, 1, 2. Okay, taking a look at that, we've now rotated this up, so you can see these are facing opposite, these are facing opposite, and we've corrected the parity. But we also rotated this around, just like we did with this. I don't have a fancy way of getting out of this, except to say that we have now reconfigured the internal structures of our edges so that we don't have parity. If we just do a quick mini re-scramble, not really re-scramble, but just put this back in, being a 4x4, it's easy enough to bring it back, then we should be able to solve it, right? Well, let's see. So here's the bottom layer, and what I'm going to want to do is just reorient this so that it works out okay with this edge over here. Okay, so now this is a configuration that's going to work. These are both facing the same way, these are facing the same way. So what are we going to call in and what are we going to call out? Well, it's hard to say. We'll say this one's right, which means this one's wrong. So which one of these are right? We'll say this one is right, which means this one is wrong. The reason why I say that is because these are flush and these are not. No particular reason. But we'll do that algorithm. All right, now we can say this is right, which means this is right. These must be wrong. So this becomes our L formation here. All right, we've seen this before and we shall see it again. 2 and 2 doesn't fit, so we'll say this is right, which means this is right, which means that these two must be wrong. So this becomes our L formation. Okay, so now these are in and the parity has been fixed. So now we're ready to do the final solution. Okay, so let's take a close look at this. Now, to the astute members or people watching this, take a very close look at what you see here. What's wrong with this picture? What's very strange and different? And I'm just going to point out that this is the red, green, and white, which is what this is. This is over here. This is obviously not where it should be, or this should be. So take a few moments, and based on everything you know, everything you've seen, push pause and ask yourself what's very different about this and what's very wrong. Something you've not seen before, something that actually doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. Got it yet? Well, we have never seen, or at least I've never seen, a situation where when solving the last corners, whether it's this or whether it's this, whether it's even or whether it's odd, who knows, who cares, where you have two that are in and two that are out. The only way that's going to happen is if these middles don't make any sense. Because no matter what I do or where I turn it, I'm never going to be able to rotate this and fix it. This is a parity unlike anything that I've ever seen before. A parity that should not have occurred, because if this is just this, and it doesn't occur on this, it should not have occurred on this one either. So why did this happen? Because if I hold it from this perspective, I'm always going to rotate them around where I'm always going to have two that are in and two that are out, and it's an impossible situation. This is a parity unlike anything that we've seen. So why? Now, to be honest with you, I racked my brain with this. I had a lot of theories and I had a lot of thoughts, and I thought, well, maybe it's the fact that we have three edges that are equivocal to each other, equivalent to each other, which you never had in any of these other things. So maybe I kind of got screwed up with that. The actual reason for this is because this specific parity that I've not seen before is what I'm going to call the parity of false equivocation. The parity of false equivocation is when you have a puzzle that's like this, and you make the assumption that just because this is one color, or any of these are one color, that you can basically make an equivocation of all the sides, that it's all equivalence. It's the fallacy of false equivalence, I should say. Fallacy of false equivalence, where this facing this way, if I rotate it, it's going to be exactly the same. Now, we've encountered this before. As you recall from the final solution of the master pyramorphinx, there's a situation in which you had similar corner seeming parities where you'd put it in, but everything was still messed up. You actually were in a situation where this, although it appears that it's the same color, it actually has a specific orientation that it's going to have to be in before you do the solve. And you wouldn't know that until the very end. So that was your fallacy of false equivalence, where you thought that every side was equivalent, but it really isn't. A similar fallacy, a similar parity has occurred here. And what's actually happened is that I've made a false equivalence between these centers. And when thinking about it, trying to coordinate exactly what happened that was similar to something that could have happened over here, what actually happened is that I figured that these whites over here perhaps, or maybe these reds, were completely equivalent to each other and I could interchange them. But again, that's the fallacy of false equivalence, where they're not equivalent. And what actually happened is that this center got skewed. So just to demonstrate that, I'm going to actually put these in a situation where they're going to be right in coordination with each other, but not in coordination with the center. So let's see how we're going to do that. So let's take a look at what we have here. You can see that there's a little bit of a skewing here. These edges, these corners rather, are actually correct in relation to each other. So if I were to move it like this. This corner's in the right place, this corner's in the right place, this is in the right place, and this is in the right place. But this is not in the right place despite these are all in. The reason why that happened is because this center is skewed. This center is wrong. Consider what would need to have happen. If only this center were just turned, with these corners staying where they were, everything would be fine. A couple questions may come to mind with that. Because these corners are incorrect, if this is skewed, if this is wrong, and this has to just rotate, how come all of these are fitting flush? All of these are fitting flush because there's parity in here too, actually. So the original parity that I saw was not the only parity that existed. There was the parity that was easily correlated with the parity that we have with, well, these guys. But in addition, there's another parity because I falsely equivocated where these centers are supposed to be. So when I was putting in the centers, I didn't line them up correctly with the corners. Even if I did line them up correctly, I assumed that this white would be pretty equivalent to maybe this white. Again, because I had to put the centers in, something like this is simply not going to happen with these larger versions of these because I have a keystone. I have centers here that tell me exactly how this is supposed to be coordinated, exactly how this is supposed to be oriented. Over here, I don't have a centerpiece within my middle to coordinate it. Over here, I do. This centerpiece not only tells me which side this is supposed to be, it also tells me how it's supposed to be coordinated. I don't have that ability here. So I simply moved it in the wrong direction. So what has to happen is I have to redo this at this late in the game. Now I could have potentially prevented this if, as I was putting my middles in and orienting that, put all my corners in first to see if they were correct. Because I didn't do that, I end up with this sort of double parity, hidden parity situation. And that's what makes this puzzle unique, and that's why it's more than just a variation of this and this. It's its own puzzle with its own strangeness to it. So what am I going to do? Well, what I actually need to do at this point is I need to put these centers in again. But what I need to do is I need to rotate it around. I need to sort of flip these guys around so that, now we'll do it from this perspective. Oh, I guess I can do it from this perspective. Rotate it around so that this whole thing is turned like this. So this has to end up like this in this position. So I'm going to move this back here, and I'm going to pretend like I'm solving for two centers. Because even though this looks like it's correct, it's not in the correct orientation. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to be very specific and say, well, I need to do some rotations to where this needs to come down to here. Because once I put these down to here, I can then use this as a basis of comparison. So this is going to be on the bottom like this, green and white, and down here it's going to have to be red, white, and white, so that it can look like that. So what I'm going to do is, given that situation, this needs to go where this is, without moving anything else. So instead what I might do is move it like this, bring this down, and then replace it with this. Because what the algorithm will do is bring this down and not touch this. So I'll know to just substitute it with this one over here, which will land this next to here, and maybe that'll act as something that I can, barter with. So we'll just move that down. All right. So what that did is that did indeed bring this down to here, and we have to remember this one that we brought down has to come over here. So I'm going to want to replace that. Okay. So now that we've done that, this guy has to come up to here. So just have to remember this is going to come up to here, and we're going to be moving this down. So this moves up like this. This will come up to here. I just have to remember that this is the one that's next to the green one, and it's got to be facing down. So once again, so now I know that this is where it's supposed to be, and this is now supposed to be here. And the reason that it's going to be there is that's what's going to be moved up. I'm just going to move this like so. So this here has to be protected. Now remember that this is the right one because it's going to be next to this green. and this red has to make it up next to here. So the first thing I want to do is move this to here, and that's going to happen by doing my algorithm again. This has to be joined by this red over here. So I'm going to turn this here, knowing that these guys won't change. This red will match up to here, and this is going to be the bottom layer. This is going to turn into the bottom layer of what I'm talking about. So do it again. So this should be what it is. Now, when I turn this, this is eventually going to turn here, and that's going to be the correct configuration, which will hopefully put my centers back where it needs to be. But for now, this is the bottom here, this is the bottom here. That's how we're going to have to orient it. So now I'm free to move these guys any way that I want. So what we have is we got our two centers. We re-emerged it, but now I put it here so that I can just turn it back into place. Now ideally what happened is I didn't mess with these guys, I just moved this guy over here. So let's turn it back here. Actually turn it over here so we have new centers. So with that said, these two are correct, they just have to be flipped around. Either that or none of them are correct. But look what I did in my corners. This is in, this is in, this is in, this is in. Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so pleased with that. But anyway, let's roll these around. Let's assume all of these are in. Maybe none of them are, but we'll just turn our algorithm. So all of these are in, and all of these are mixed up. So let's just arbitrarily pick one and just start rotating these around. So we have forward, forward, back, back, forward, back, back, forward. So this is in, and none of these are in, so that fit perfectly. That parity is now gone. That false equivalency, where I didn't put that in quite in the right direction, so let's do this now. And it's fine. This is right, this is right, this is right, and this is right. And you may say, oh my gosh, another impossible parity. Just one is flipped and all the others are in. But again, that's once again the parity of false equivalence. We are assuming that each side is equivalent. They're not, so we're going to rotate this in and rotate it out from here. If to anyone who has the master pyramorphinx, when you get into this situation, it's exactly the same thing. So we'll just rotate this down, turn, 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 turn. Not surprisingly, this is in, but everything else is out. So turn this around one, flip this around, the white one around. Do not commit the fallacy or the parity of false equivalence. So turn, 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 and despite bears of parity, despite all that, it's solved. We did it. We got through it in a very unique way with all the different parities, and that's how to deal with the even layered versions of these things. Very challenging, and I gotta say it took me a while before I figured that out. I spent many hours during an evening playing with it, trying to figure it out, couldn't. It wasn't until I just slept on it, did a 5-mile run, and then it occurred to me in an aha moment that maybe it was a false equivalency within the centers. So a lot of fun to figure out and hopefully useful should you ever get this, which I think you should. By way of finishing up, well, what about this guy? Again, solve it just like a megamorphix. Okay, Bump it out, put it here. Now this will move down here, but this time in the right configuration, which would be like this. Turn, 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 and turn. Mega Master morphix on steroids. Okay, so now we just have this last layer here, and same principles apply. This appears to be in, this is facing the wrong way, this is facing the wrong way. These two aren't facing each other, these two aren't facing each other. So I know this is right, therefore I know this is wrong. Which one of these two are right? Well, it's hard to tell. I'm very tempted to say that this is right because it's flush here. These two are flipped wrong. So I'm going to pretend like this is the L configuration, like you'd find, say, this is right and this is right. So if this is right, we're going to say that this is wrong and this is right. So I'm going to turn it like this. We'll say that these two are in the right position and these two should be flipped. Yeah, that makes more sense. Because if this is right, this is also right. Which means these two must be wrong, but they both must be wrong at the same time, because if I flip one, they're going to be going the same direction and not facing each other. So that's the kind of reasoning that I'm going to use. So we'll go, and boy, I was so right with my thinking, it just went its way in there. Okay, so then we just fill in the rest of these, but let's put all these centers back where they're supposed to be. Good, good, good. Any of these where, how about this one? Yeah, this is where it's supposed to be. So same type of situation. They're all in, they just need to be rotated. So let's see what happens when we do that here. Turn, 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 turn. This is right. So move this around here, do the same thing. Turn, 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 turn. These are right, but we're still not where we need to be, but no worries. Just turn it to another edge and rotate that around and see what happens. Turn, 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 turn. Doesn't really matter which one I do, because the end result will still be the same, which hopefully is a solve. All right, this guy's conquered. Now, this beast. Turn, 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 turn. Oop, actually got myself a pyramidal form back there. So it's fighting me at this point as I got out of it. Like that pyramidal form, doesn't want me to get out of it. But fear not, all will be returned. Okay, so there's our second side of this massive giant. So same things apply here. Let's see if we can reason our way through this. Let's say this is right, which means we would have to say that this, well, this is obviously wrong, it's facing the wrong way. So these are all facing the same side. If we say this is right, we can say maybe this is right, and these guys just need to be flipped over. So we'll use this as the F side here. So F, R, U, R, I, U, I, F, I. Now, see what that did. Okay, so these are facing each other, these are facing each other, but this configuration is not going to work because you're not supposed to have two that are out and two that are in. And I know I'm not going to get parity with this guy because it's an odd number here. Yep, and it worked, it went in. Now we just have to move these in configuration. This is interesting because this is right and all of these are wrong, so we have to rotate these around. But again, we'll just rotate this down and around, turn, 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 turn. All right, So we're good. Turn this around twice, see if it solves it. Turn, 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 and turn. Nope, didn't solve it. That's okay. We don't panic, we just turn it to whatever side and rotate this little triangle around and see if that's all we need to do. So, down, across, up, back, down, across, up, back, and we are done. And we have done it. We have done a tandem solve of our 3 supergiants. Now, I will tell you that with the parity situations and everything, and it's done the same way, there is a 6-layer version coming out called the hexaphobic, which I'll be getting. It's done exactly the same way, but for demonstration purposes, I might show that. It's the ultimate challenge because not only do you have higher layers to deal with, but you also have a higher layer even number, so you can get the parity over there. But the solution is pretty much the same. So there we have it. We'll now leave the land of the supergiants.